back through your portfolio and seeing work that you don't like? Well, that's currently where I'm at. A couple months ago, I made this design, and while it turned out how I wanted it to, and it's all right, I feel like it's not a great example of editorial design. Since I've made that design, I've put a lot of my own personal time into trying to develop the skills that would kind of make great editorial, like focusing a lot more on typography and layout. I'm not exactly perfect at it, but it's definitely something that I've been practicing, and I want to try to practice some more. So now that I have better skills that make good editorial work, I want to kind of redo a project that is an editorial design that I can really kind of showcase what I've learned so far and hopefully improve as well. So my plan for this project is to be a coffee table style book that goes over different types of shots in filmmaking. I actually went to school for film production, so I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for film, and so I thought this would just be a good way to combine my love for film as well as my love for graphic design. Now, with that being said, I have 4 goals that I want to accomplish with this project. The first one being I want to create an editorial design that showcases great typography and layout skills. My second goal is to work with various types of copy. I've done a lot of work with kind of more sparse copy, but I want to do something that's also dense, so that way I can showcase that I can do both. And my third goal is I want to balance the typography with the imagery. I want it to kind of function and look good, but I also want it to be interesting and be something that you actually want to kind of leave out and show to people. Now, my fourth and final goal is that I want to work predominantly, if not exclusively, in InDesign. Honestly, I really don't like using InDesign, so I try to avoid it whenever I can. I know how to use it, but it's not a program that I'm super comfortable in. So I thought this would be a good time to really kind of throw myself in the deep end and then just to make it work. In that way, I might be able to become at least a little bit more comfortable with this program, especially if I want to do more work in editorial design. This will be kind of the expectation, is to work in InDesign. So with all that out of the way, let me show you where I'm currently at. All right, so currently, this is pretty much where I'm at. I really haven't done much work, at least as far as like making any actual designs. Really, it's just kind of just been getting the project set up. So like I've went over here and I've created some just some paragraph style, so that way I can use that. It's already set up. I already know it, and I have it aligned to the base grid, or baseline, excuse me. So that way everything will be neat, tidy. I just want this to look as good as it possibly can. So I just kind of went and did all of the kind of boring stuff that I honestly am kind of still learning myself. But anyways, I also set up some of the master pages. This isn't one that I'm actually using for any of the master pages. It's just kind of a quick document of the different paragraph styles. So if I want to, I can just quickly look and see that here. I've seen some people do this, so I just kind of wanted to test it out, and I thought it might be smart to do. And then of course I have just a rough master page set up for both of these pages, which now that I can see, they're not even right, but none of this is necessarily official. It might change, but I just kind of wanted to get you guys caught up. And then I just quickly did a couple quick edits, nothing that I think is actually going to turn into anything that you'll actually see. But like I said, since I'm not really familiar with InDesign as much, or I'm not very comfortable, I just wanted to kind of do some quick designs just to kind of see what I could come up with and see kind of how it works and see if I can make the things the way that I might want to if I was in like Photoshop, which I didn't really have too much issues with that. So I think at this point I could pretty much get started on the project and actually either, coming up with ideas or trying to lay out stuff, or, whatever it is that I kind of want to start with. But I'll kind of talk through that as I showcase more of the project. So let's actually get started. So unlike normal, I actually started this project out with some sketches. My thought process was, since I'm not really familiar with InDesign, it would be a lot harder for me to kind of experiment and try things out just because I'm not as familiar with the tools. And so I figured it would be a lot easier for me just to kind of look at the photography that I've already kind of gathered. And that way I can kind of see what I have and then write down some ideas really quickly, rough. Doesn't have to be perfect, but at least that would kind of get my ideas onto paper. And specifically with the title pages, I had a specific vision that I wanted to bring to life. I wanted to find some way to visually tell what the shot was. Not just about showing the photography, it's also about showing people how it's used. And so I think focusing on the attributes that make each shot individually different is a great way to explore things visually as well as from an experience perspective. But once I got some sketches that I was happy with and I felt like I had enough to at least get started, my first thing was to go to ChatGPT so it could kind of help me come up with some of the copy that I would be using for this booklet. I had it come up with a couple different variations, some that were longer, some that were shorter. That way I have some options in terms of maybe I want this page to be more dense with typography. Maybe I want it to be more visually focused. So I can kind of make that decision and I can try out a little bit of both. And once I had the copy that I needed, I could finally jump into InDesign and actually start kind of laying out some of the pages. For this project specifically, I used a 8x12 grid. I prefer these more densely packed grids just because I feel like I have more options with where I place things. And especially for a project like this where I'm trying to kind of push things to be as creative as possible, I think that was a good decision. Especially having the 12-column grid. Having a 12-column grid is really versatile because it's divisible by a lot of different things. So if you wanted to, you could split the copy up into 2 different sections that span across the entire page. Or maybe you make it even less and now it's 3. Or maybe even more and you need 4. Each of those numbers and columns is divisible by 12, so it's a really versatile grid system that I just really enjoyed using. And honestly, it'll probably be my default going forward. But right now with these layouts, especially when it comes to the kind of the right side of the page where it's really focusing on the information, not as much the visuals, I'm not really trying too hard to come up with something that is going to be the final result. I'm just trying to kind of get the copy on the paper, kind of see if I like having, the photography here or there. I'm really just trying to get something onto the page because once it's there, I can edit it, but staring at a blank page feels a little bit overwhelming. So for me, I'm like, let's just get something on there and then I can always change it later. But at least that gives me a starting point and something visually to look at so I can kind of start working through everything and all the details. And once I had the layout for all of the copy kind of squared away, I can move on to the visuals or the title pages. And like I said, I wanted these to kind of like stand out and be unique and be a kind of visual centerpiece. And I know I said that I wanted to work predominantly in InDesign, but for the ideas that I was going for, I don't know if I am even able to make those in InDesign. So I just quickly went into Photoshop so that way I could create those and then bring them into InDesign. I feel like I'm still sticking with my goal of working predominantly in InDesign, but like I said, I don't think InDesign really has the capabilities or the tools that enable me to do that. So the only other option I have is Photoshop. All right, so I've been working on these designs for a little bit, and I feel like it's at least in a good starting place. I definitely want to go through all the pages and make a lot of tweaks. Mainly what I've been focused on is kind of the section headers, because currently the way that I have it laid out is you have the left side that kind of introduces the topic and then the right side with all the copy. And so I've mostly just been on the left side, kind of trying to make that imagery interesting, as well as kind of symbolic of whatever the shot kind is. So if it's wide, it does something that kind of signifies it being wide. I feel like what I have currently is at least all right, but there's definitely some that I feel like I need to kind of do a little bit better on. But so far, I haven't really done a whole lot with the right side. There might be a page or two that I put a little bit of effort into, but really, mostly what I did so far is just kind of throw some copy on there just as a placeholder so it's there and I can use it if I want. But I haven't really gone through to kind of make the layout or, try to add or take away typography. So that's still going to be a big thing that I have to do going forward. But so far, so good. So let's finish up this project. After working on this project for a couple of days, I can finally say it's finished. And compared to the last editorial design that I did, I'm much more happier with the outcome of this one. I think overall, this entire project is a great example of my understanding of layout and typography. And even though I was working with some limitations like working with a grid, I still feel like it came out pretty creative. I always like to try to do something that's a little bit more creative and try to push the boundaries a little bit. And I feel like I landed on a really good in between where, you know, it's not pushing the boundaries so much that it's too crazy or chaotic that you can't understand what's going on, or it's just, you know, bending the rules too much, but it's also not rigid and boring. So I feel like it has some type of creativity to it that makes it interesting to look at. Now, I did change or add a few spreads to this project than I had originally intended because I was asking somebody's opinion on what I had so far, and they had mentioned that it kind of feels a little bit, they said it felt a little bit dense in terms of the pacing, just because you have these very dense pages where you have photography and copy, and then you just go right into another one. And so they kind of mentioned that maybe it might be good to kind of break it up a little bit, so that way, you know, you can add some different colors and you can kind of spread out some of the photography, so that way there's a little bit more of a pace going on. So it's not just like one after another, you know, it's just nonstop. You have like, okay, here's like the information heavy stuff, and then here's like a breather spread where it's just the images, and you can kind of take a moment to reflect and look at all of, like, you know, the nice images and take in all those details, which I think was a great addition for this project. It might not exactly work towards my goal of showing off great layout or typography skills. I guess you could argue the layout part, but I think it does kind of showcase some other skills in terms of, like, you know, building this project and making it feel realistic, and as well as making it, you know, a little bit better. And I know I mentioned earlier in the video that what I was trying to do with all the title pages is kind of like take the attributes of the different shots and kind of use them to make some kind of interesting title page. But I also feel like I managed to do that exact same thing with the layouts that were just for the photography. So for the extreme close-up spread, I actually made a handful of the images kind of tiny, because the way that I'm thinking of it is like, oh, you know, if someone was reading this book, they might actually have to kind of lean into the image, into the book, to kind of see what the image is. And I feel like that's exactly kind of what a close-up is. You know, you're leaning in, you're getting really close, and you're putting it, you know, right up next to your eye. And that's the feeling that I would want someone to kind of feel if they were reading the book, or if, you know, they were using that type of shot. Same thing with the wide, where, you know, I'm just taking these images and I'm making them feel as wide as they possibly can by, you know, making a box that the images are going into that are very wide. And I think it just kind of enunciates the fact that these are very wide looking images. And while I didn't plan for any of that to happen, it's a detail that I'm honestly really happy with and excited about, because that's something that I kind of like to take with all of my work, you know, trying to find ways to kind of visually communicate different things, or kind of give people different experiences, rather than just, you know, taking the photographs and then putting them onto a grid and being like, oh, well, it's good enough. You know, it's how can I take this idea a step further to make it even more exciting or interesting. And lastly, with this project, I was able to work pretty much predominantly in InDesign. The only thing that I did in Photoshop was create some of the title pages where I had to work with PNGs. Like I said, I don't think there's really a way to do that kind of stuff in InDesign, so I had to use Photoshop. But other than that, I did everything in InDesign, and I even learned a couple new tips and tricks along the way. So, you know, exactly what I was trying to do, which is just gain more experience with this program and just be a little bit more comfortable with it. I feel like with this project, I was able to hit all the goals that I was trying to accomplish and make something that I'm excited about. But with that being said, I would love to hear what you guys thought. Did I do a good job? Did I not do a good job? Is there maybe something that I missed that I should have added, or, you know, maybe I just didn't realize that I missed? You know, let me know in the comments. And of course, as always, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. Hope to see you in the next video.